Good morning, everybody. You're watching our mid-morning edition of Arirang News on this Thursday, August 13th. Coming to you live from our studio in Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min. And before we get started, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. Doctors in South Korea are preparing for another one-day strike over the government's pandemic preparation plans. Around 130,000 of them will walk off the job for 24 hours on Friday. South Korean shipbuilders take the world's #1 ranking in new shipping orders in July for the first time so far this year. They account for over 70% of new global orders, far outstripping their Chinese rivals. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris make their first campaign debut as running mates for the November presidential election. Harris slams President Trump, accusing him of not being up to the job. Our starting point this morning, at least tens of thousands of doctors in South Korea will walk off the job for one day on Friday, which is tomorrow, and that would be the second such kind in a week. And they are protesting the government's plans to expand admissions quotas for medical schools in the country. Our Kim Hyo-sun leading us off.
A majority of neighborhood clinics in South Korea will close on Friday as the Korea Medical Association has decided to go ahead with its scheduled one-day strike. The decision made by the KMA, which represents some 130,000 doctors nationwide, is in protest against healthcare reforms announced by the government, including a plan to expand admissions quotas for medical schools. However, the KMA said medical practitioners, whose services directly affect the lives of patients, such as those working in emergency rooms, intensive care units, and delivery rooms, will not join the strike. The president of the KMA wrote on his Facebook page that doctors are faced with continued threats by the authorities that they will issue a guidance or order medical institutions to resume medical services. Noting Article 59 of the Medical Service Act provides the legal ground for the government to issue such an order, Choi Dae-ji called for the need to abolish such an act that undermines doctors' rights to collective action. While the KMA refuses to sit down for talks, the government continues to stress the need for negotiations.
The government has expressed its intention to embrace the idea of establishing a consultative body, as suggested by the KMA. We ask the association to come to the negotiation table to get the wisdom with the Ministry of Health and Welfare.
Health Minister Bang Neung-hoo will make a public statement at 11 a.m. Thursday, urging the doctors to withdraw their plans. Last week, thousands of trainee doctors staged a one-day strike, arguing the government's, quote, hasty and unilateral decision to expand the quotas may lead to insufficient medical training. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
With mounting skepticism over Russia's touted COVID-19 vaccine, Russia's health minister has blasted the concerns as, quote, groundless. Speaking to Interfax news agency on Wednesday, Malikai Murashiko said other countries are sensing the specific competitiveness advantages of the Russian drug and are trying to express negative opinions on their progress. Russia said earlier this Tuesday that a vaccine had been given regulatory approval after less than 2 months of human testing. The minister also added that initial batches would be available in 2 weeks and will be earmarked for vaccinations for doctors before being made available to the public. South Korean shipbuilders overtook their Chinese rivals, taking the top spot in the global order book last month. Now, that marks the first time this year alone that Korea has led the industry for orders. Our Choi Jung-yun tells us more.
South Korea shipbuilders won more orders than those of any other country in July, with more than 2/3 of the total global order book. According to data from Clarkson Research Services, the total volume of orders received by South Korean firms was 500,000 compensated gross tonnage, or CGT, for 12 vessels in July, taking 74% of the total global order size. Chinese shipbuilders came in second, winning new orders for 8 ships, coming to 144,000 CGT, followed by Japanese shipyards with 1 ship at 30,000 CGT. This marks the first time this year that Korean shipbuilders have taken the top spot in the monthly global order book. The stellar performance last month was largely due to the LNG ship order won by Hyundai Heavy Industries. Korea Shipbuilding and Offshore Engineering, a unit of Hyundai Heavy, signed a deal to build 4 LNG carriers for ship owners in Europe and Bermuda, along with 2 more vessels for carrying petrochemicals and a cruise ship. Chinese companies still top the rankings, however, for the first 7 months of the year, with accumulated orders of 3.7 million CGT, taking up almost 60% of total global orders. Korean and Japanese shipbuilders followed at 25% and 10% respectively. Clarkson reported that total orders in the first 7 months of 2020 were just 40% of last year's figure for the same period. That's the sector's worst performance in a decade. South Korea shipbuilders are hoping the strong orders in July mark the start of a turnaround. However, pundits say the industry will only pick up once the COVID-19 crisis has stabilized and world cargo volume jumps back up. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
Gold prices in South Korea have dropped sharply in line with prices on the international market. On Tuesday, the price of gold was down by 6% at around $61 a gram. Now, this is the biggest daily drop since the year of 2014, when the Korean exchange market for gold was first established. The drop is due to largely by rising optimism on positive vaccine news, including the recent development in Russia. Over in New York, the price of gold for December delivery plunged, finishing at around $1,946 an ounce, a 4.6% drop. Presumptive U.S. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have lashed out at U.S. President Donald Trump at their first appearance together as running mates. Shortly after their appearance in Delaware on Wednesday local time, U.S. President Donald Trump hit right back, saying Harris is, quote, weak on facts. Our Kim Jae-hee with more.
Just a day after U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden chose California Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate, the two appeared together for the first time in public as the Democratic presidential ticket. Biden insisted he had no doubt he had picked the right person and introduced his former primary rival as a smart, proven fighter who would help him defeat President Trump on November 3rd.
Kamala knows how to govern. She knows how to make the hard calls. She's ready to do this job on day one.
Born to Jamaican and Indian immigrants, the 55-year-old former California Attorney General is the first Black and South Asian American woman to run on a major U.S. political party's presidential ticket. With her mixed-race heritage and background in law, the Democrats are hoping to appeal to a wider spectrum of voters. Harris expressed honor and enthusiasm in her remarks. She also lashed out at President Trump, criticizing his response to the COVID-19 pandemic. She said America is crying out for leadership, but President Trump cares more about himself.
The president's mismanagement of the pandemic has plunged us into the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And we're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and systemic injustice.
Shortly after the speeches in Delaware, President Trump held a press conference at the White House where he hit back at Harris. He reiterated his previous remarks that he was surprised by Biden's pick, noting how her campaign, quote, dropped like a rock, and claiming that she's very weak on facts.
And you don't want to pick somebody that went down. She went down, but she went down in a very terrible way.
Should Biden win the election, he'll be the oldest president in U.S. history, and Harris will be the first woman to serve as vice president. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
The U.S. Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says that Washington has a strong and very effective homeland defense system against North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missiles. Speaking at the Hudson Institute think tank on Wednesday, John Hyten said interceptors in Alaska and the Vandenberg Air Base can handle the threat. However, he said the U.S. missile defense capabilities need to be modernized to respond to evolving global threats. He also said he was disappointed by the termination of a new kill vehicle program last year, adding it's crucial to move quickly to secure a next-generation kill vehicle with more specific and realistic requirements. And turning now to the aftermath of last week's explosion in Lebanon, the enormous blast in the capital of Beirut has left half of all of the city's hospitals unusable, raising concerns over the lack of facilities to take care of the thousands of people who were injured. Now, this comes as Lebanon continues to see a surge in COVID-19 cases. Our Lee Seung-jae with more.
According to the World Health Organization, over 50% of healthcare facilities in Beirut have been left out of use. In an online conference from Cairo on Wednesday, the WHO's Director for Regional Emergencies, Richard Brenna, said that after carrying out inspections at 55 clinics and healthcare centers in Beirut, over half were now out of use, including 3 key hospitals. He added that 3 other major hospitals are working under capacity. The shortage comes as the country is still dealing with a surge of COVID-19 cases. Health authorities say the public system was already struggling to handle the increasing number of cases as it was. Lebanon has been reporting 1,500 new cases a week, with a quarter coming from Beirut. According to Lebanese President Michel Aoun, the financial cost incurred by the blast is estimated to be more than $15 billion. While an international donor conference on Sunday raised nearly $300 million worth of humanitarian relief, more aid is needed for a country that's long been struggling economically. The explosion has also fueled intense public outrage, sparking the entire government to resign on Monday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Almost all the remaining oil from the Japanese cargo ship that has caused a massive oil spill after it ran around off a coast of Mauritius has been pumped out. The island nation's prime minister said more than 3,000 tons of oil from the ship's fuel tanks had been pumped out and only a small amount remained on board someplace else. He also added that the operation had been a race against time amid fears the ship could break into two. The fuel was transferred to shore by helicopter and to another ship owned by the same Japanese firm of this stranded ship. The ship ran aground on a coral reef on July 25th and caused massive environmental damage to the island nation home to world-renowned coral reefs.
Good morning. Most regions had a muggy start to the day and looks to be a blistering day across much of the country with heat wave alerts in place for most parts. And along with the heat, that high humidity, stickiness will make us feel really uncomfortable during the day and night. In fact, we won't receive monsoon rain, but inland regions could see heavy passing showers, so have an umbrella handy. Afternoon highs will be similar to slightly higher this afternoon, topping out at 30 degrees in Seoul, Daegu topping out at 35, Gyeongju at 34 degrees this afternoon. Speaking of which, southern provinces will be dealing with steamy heat for the next 5 days, with temperatures in Daegu hovering around 35 degrees Celsius under blazing sunshine. While central regions will see heavy monsoon rain from tomorrow into Sunday, possibly up to 200 millimeters. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that's all the news we have for this hour on Arirang News, but we'll be back with more of the day's headlines coming up at noon Korea time, so do join us again then. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.